Sarah was 34 years old when her husband, Mark, walked through the door with a new title and a younger woman on his arm to replace her. He handed his wife an apron and gave her a command. "Cook for us." He thought Sarah was a doormat he'd finally outgrown. From the day of his promotion, Mark became abusive, unaware that his wife was a retired soldier. He pushed her until the final straw, and that's when Sarah became his karma. The promotion came on a Tuesday. Her husband walked through the door at 6:47 p.m., tie loosened, jaw already clenched with something that looked like victory but tasted like permission. He didn't kiss her. He dropped his briefcase on the marble counter, the one she'd spent 3 years saving for, and said the words that would become the hinge of everything that followed. "I'm taking the position." She was chopping cilantro. The knife was sharp. She kept chopping. What he meant was, everything changes now. Everything I've kept hidden is about to walk through that door. And you're going to watch. She knew who he was before the promotion, a man who checked his phone during dinner, a man whose eyes moved toward the door when women entered rooms, a man who kept a second cologne in his car, the kind he said was for the gym but smelled like jasmine and lies. She'd known, she'd always known. But knowing and proving are different things. She was 34 years old. She had a scar on her left shoulder blade from a training exercise that went wrong. She had another scar, deeper, invisible, from watching her father collapse after his third fight in the boxing ring. She had learned by that point that some pain lives in the muscles and never leaves. Some pain lives in the brain and becomes wisdom. Her name was Sarah Chen, and she had learned over 34 years to disappear into her own life. She put down the knife. "That's wonderful," she said, and meant none of it. He didn't hear the absence in her voice because absence is what men who've won stop listening for. A woman doesn't become invisible in a day. It takes practice. It takes the muscle memory of a person trained to assess threats, calculate angles, and move through space without claiming it. Sarah had learned this in the military. She had perfected it in her marriage. The first week after the promotion, he brought her home. She was younger, 23 maybe, with the kind of face that had been trained, through TikTok, through Instagram, through the algorithm itself, to look perpetually surprised by her own beauty. Her name was Jade. She had 10 million followers. She had a ring light in her car. He brought her to their house on a Thursday evening. Sarah was in the kitchen. She heard the keys. She heard the laugh, not his usual laugh, but the one he'd been practicing, the one that said, "I'm different now. I'm better now. I'm the kind of man who can have this." She didn't turn around. He walked past her with Jade's hand in his. Not even a glance in Sarah's direction. She was furniture. She was the hired help. She was the woman who lived in the house but didn't live in his life anymore. "Make something nice for dinner," he said, still not looking at her. Jade loves seafood. Sarah had already begun reaching for the ingredients before her brain caught up to the words. That's how deep the training goes. Obedience becomes a reflex. A woman can disappear so completely that even she stops noticing herself missing. Jade sat at the dining table, their table, the one with the walnut finish that Sarah's mother had given them as a wedding gift, and scrolled through her phone, occasionally holding it up to film the house, the light, the view. "My followers would love this aesthetic," she said, so understated, so quiet. She meant so dead. That first night, after they left, Sarah stood in the shower for 45 minutes. She stood under the water and didn't cry. She had learned not to cry. Crying was the sound of a person who still believes in fairness, and fairness had stopped existing the moment he put his ring on her finger. The water ran cold, then colder. She didn't move. When she got out, she dried off slowly. She looked at herself in the mirror, not at her face, but at her body. At the shoulders that had been trained to carry weight, at the hands that had been trained to break things, at the scar on her left shoulder blade, pale now, almost white, like a ghost of something she'd chosen to forget. She made a decision. The next morning, while her husband was at work and the world was still sleeping, Sarah ordered 4 tiny cameras online. Not the kind that are obvious, not the kind that announce themselves, the kind that hide in picture frames, in alarm clocks, in the decorative vase that nobody looks at twice. They arrived 3 days later. She installed them in the kitchen, the bedroom, the living room, and the hallway. She set them to record on motion detection. She bought an external hard drive and hid it behind the books on the shelf. His shelf, the one he never opened, because it contained the kind of stories that don't reward men like him. This was not paranoia. This was preparation. This was the first act of a woman who had learned in the special forces that intelligence is the only real weapon. That information is the only leverage that matters. That a person who documents their own destruction is no longer entirely destroyed. They're a witness. They're evidence. They're the prosecution. She didn't tell him. Jade came back the next week, and the week after that, and the week after that. Each time, the ritual was the same. He would walk past Sarah like she was a ghost. He would say something, a command, never a question, about what to cook, what to prepare, what to arrange. Jade would post videos. Sarah would smile the smile that a woman wears when she has decided to be invisible. But the cameras were recording. On the 5th visit, Jade posted a video to her Instagram story. The lighting was golden. The house was blurred artistically in the background. She was in focus, always in focus, with her hand on his chest, saying, "Some women just don't know how to keep their man. Lucky for some of us, we don't have to try." The caption was a laughing emoji. The hashtag was upgrade. Sarah saw it, not because she was following Jade, she wasn't, but because her husband showed it to her. He held the phone up to her face, right there in the kitchen, right there while she was plating the food she'd made for them. "Look," he said. And he smiled. He smiled like a man who had just been given permission to stop pretending to love her. Like the promotion had been a translation. Like he'd finally figured out the language he'd been learning his whole life. The language of entitlement. Sarah looked at the phone. She saw her own house reflected in Jade's eyes. She saw herself smaller and smaller, disappearing into the background of a video that 10 million people had already watched. She said, "The food is ready." He turned away, satisfied. 2 weeks. That's how long the cameras ran before the moment that would break everything. 2 weeks of motion detection footage, 2 weeks of evidence, 2 weeks of a woman silently building a case against the man who had promised to love her forever. The footage told a story that Sarah's face never would. Day 1. Him asking Jade to take a selfie with him at the dining table. Sarah visible in the background, just barely. Blurred, forgotten. Day 4. Jade making a comment about Sarah's cooking, something dismissive, something small. Him laughing like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. Day 7. Him raising his voice about the wine she'd chosen, saying it was not what Jade preferred. Jade smiling, knowing she was being centered. Sarah nodding, adjusting, disappearing further. Day 10. The second slap. It came on a Thursday evening. Jade was in the bathroom. He was in the kitchen. Sarah was washing dishes. He came up behind her and said, "The pasta last night was too salty. It was embarrassing." She didn't respond. He interpreted her silence as disrespect. His hand moved like muscle memory, like a reflex, like something he'd been practicing in his mind for months, just waiting for the moment when he had enough permission to make it real. The camera caught it. The flash of motion, the impact, her head jerking slightly to the side, her hands still submerged in soapy water, her body absorbing the blow without flinching, and then silence. He walked away. She continued washing dishes. The camera kept recording. Every day was another layer. Every post Jade made was another brick in the structure of his humiliation. Every time he looked at Sarah with that new coldness in his eyes, she was calculating. Every time he touched Jade in front of her, a hand on the small of her back, a whisper in her ear, a kiss on her forehead, Sarah was documenting. On day 12, Jade posted again, "Real women know how to keep their man. It's called standards." The video showed her sitting on the couch, their couch, in lingerie, waiting for him to come home from work. The comments flooded in. Thousands of them. Congratulations. Validation. A chorus of women telling her she was right to do this. Telling her she'd won. Sarah watched the engagement meter climb. 47,000 likes, 23,000 comments. A woman being celebrated for destroying another woman's marriage in real time, with receipts, with evidence, with 10 million witnesses. She saved the video to her hard drive. On day 14, he made his final mistake. He came home late. Jade was already there, waiting in the living room. Sarah was making dinner, always making dinner, always the servant in her own house. He walked past her without saying hello. He walked past her without acknowledging that she existed. He sat down on the couch. Jade curled into him. He put his arm around her like Sarah had never been his wife at all, like she was a mistake he'd corrected, like the years they'd spent together were a trial run before the real thing began. And then he said it. "You know what? I think we should talk about next steps." Sarah's knife paused, just for a second, just long enough for the camera to catch the moment her hand stopped moving. "I'm thinking about upgrading the living situation. Maybe somewhere new, something that reflects who I actually am." Jade laughed. "I'd love that." "Of course you would," he said, and Sarah understood in that moment that the moral debt had finished accumulating. There was no more information to gather. There was no more evidence to collect. There was only one moment left to happen, and it was going to come soon. She put the knife down, very carefully, very deliberately. She had learned in her training that the moment before action is the most important moment. The moment when you decide. The moment when you stop being a person who endures and become a person who acts. That moment had arrived. For 7 days, nothing changed on the surface. She cooked. He ate. Jade filmed. The world watched. The followers multiplied. The debt grew heavier and heavier, like pressure building in a sealed space, like a fuse burning down in darkness. She didn't tell him she knew about the plan to leave. She didn't tell him she'd heard him on the phone with a real estate agent, describing the kind of apartment that would be more appropriate for someone at my level. She didn't tell him that she'd recorded that conversation too. She simply waited. On the 8th day, she made a decision. In the evening, after Jade had left, and before he'd settled into the couch with his phone, Sarah made dinner. Just for him. No Jade, no performance. Just a meal, carefully prepared, and an invitation to sit at the table. He was suspicious. She could see it in the way his eyes narrowed. A man who has become accustomed to victory doesn't trust quiet. Quiet is dangerous. Quiet is where women hide their rage. "What is this?" he asked. "Dinner," she said. He sat. He ate. He waited for her to beg, to plead, to cry, to ask for forgiveness for whatever crime he'd invented in his head. Instead, she said, "Leave her. I'll forgive this. I'll forgive everything." For a moment, the world paused. For a moment, it seemed like he might actually consider it. Like he might see the out that she was offering him. Like he might choose mercy. But then he laughed. It was the kind of laugh that contained the answer to a question no one had asked. The kind of laugh that said, "You have no power here. I am beyond your forgiveness. I am the kind of man who doesn't have to ask for permission anymore." "You," he said, "you'll forgive me. You need me. Without me, you're nothing. You understand that, right? Nothing." Sarah stood up. She cleared the plates. She didn't say anything because she didn't need to. She had already decided. The moment for mercy had passed, and it had been rejected. Now there was only one moment left to live through. And it was coming tomorrow. She woke early. The sun hadn't risen yet. The city was still sleeping. She lay in bed and felt her body. She felt the muscle memory. She felt the training. She felt the ghost of her father, the boxer, the man who had taught her that some pain has to be answered with action. She made coffee. She checked the cameras. Everything was in place. The hard drive was hidden. The videos were backed up. The evidence was solid. At work, her husband was getting ready for another day. He had no idea. That was the thing about arrogance. It's so complete that it can't imagine the world moving around it. It can't fathom that other people have plans, that other people have been thinking, that other people have been documenting the exact angle of their own destruction. He texted her at noon. "Jade's coming over tonight. Make something special." She replied, "Okay." And she meant it. The day moved slowly. Time does this when a person is waiting for a hinge moment, waiting for the axis on which everything will turn. At 5:47 p.m., he came home. He didn't say hello. He never did anymore. He went to the bedroom and changed his shirt. He sprayed on the jasmine cologne, the one that wasn't for the gym. He checked his phone 17 times. At 6:15 p.m., Jade arrived. She was wearing something red, something tight, something designed to be seen. She walked into the house like she owned it. Maybe she thought she did. Maybe he'd promised her. Maybe the delusion was complete enough that both of them believed the fiction he'd constructed. He kissed her hello. Right there in the foyer, right where the camera could see. "Make us something," he called out to Sarah. "Jade's hungry." Sarah was in the kitchen. She was wearing a grey sweater. Her hair was pulled back. She looked like a woman who had been erased. She looked like a woman who had accepted her own disappearance. She began to cook. And this is where the story changes. This is where the woman who learned to be invisible learned to be visible again. She was plating the food when he called out from the living room. "Cook something for her, now." The command hung in the air like smoke, like permission, like the final brick in a structure that had been building for 2 months. Sarah set down the plate. She turned around. And for the first time in 60 days, she didn't nod. She didn't move toward the kitchen. She didn't disappear. She said, "No." The word was small. 4 letters. Nothing that should have broken the world. But it did. He stood up. His face changed. Not with anger, with shock, with the shock of a man who has never been told no by someone he owns. His hand was already moving before his brain caught up to it. Muscle memory, reflex, the language he'd been learning his whole life. She caught his wrist mid-air, her fingers closed around his arm, not hard, not yet. Just enough to stop the motion, just enough for him to understand that something fundamental had shifted. "I would beat the living daylight out of you if you dare." Her voice was different now. It wasn't the voice of the woman who cooked and served and disappeared. It was the voice of a person trained to break things, trained to assess threats, trained to move through violence like water. For 1 second, just one, he hesitated. Then he made his final choice. He tried to kick her from the ground. The human body is a series of vulnerabilities. The military teaches this. Her father's boxing career had taught it too. You don't have to be stronger than your opponent. You have to know where they break. His first kick came from the ground. Sloppy, desperate, born from panic, not training. She sidestepped it. His momentum carried him forward, his body extended. She moved with the motion, not against it. The technique is called Aikido, using your opponent's force to disarm them. His shoulder hit the counter. He gasped. She didn't hesitate, she never did. That's the difference between a person who fights occasionally and a person who was trained to fight as a profession. The occasional fighter pauses. The trained fighter executes. Her hand moved to his neck, not to crush it, but to control it, to demonstrate knowledge, to show him that every part of his body was territory she understood completely. He tried to roll, he tried to escape, he tried to call out. Nothing worked. Jade screamed. Jade ran toward them, hands raised, voice pitched at a frequency designed to shatter. "Stop! Stop! What are you doing?" Sarah released him for just long enough to turn toward Jade. The mistress had made a choice, not to run, but to intervene. That was her mistake. Sarah's hand moved, one motion, precise. The heel of her palm connected with Jade's sternum. Not to kill, not to crush, just enough to demonstrate that a woman's rage has physics too. Jade fell backward onto the couch. The wind knocked out of her, her mouth open, making sounds but no words. Sarah turned back to him. He was scrambling now, trying to stand, trying to use his weight against her. But weight means nothing to a person trained in how to move through space without announcing themselves. She pivoted. Her leg extended, not a kick. A sweep, one motion. Physics. He went down hard. His back hit the floor. The breath left his body. The room went silent. This is the moment that nobody talks about. The moment after violence when the world forgets how to make sound. He was on his back, gasping. His face the color of old paper, his eyes moving but not seeing. Jade was on the couch, still breathing but not moving. Her phone had fallen to the floor. The screen was dark. Nobody was filming. Nobody was documenting. Nobody was watching. Just the three of them. In a house that used to be a home. Sarah stood up, very slowly. She brushed her hands off on her sweater like she'd just finished the dishes. Like she'd just completed a task. She walked to the kitchen. She picked up her phone. She dialed 911. When the operator answered, her voice was calm. It didn't shake. It didn't break. It sounded like a woman reporting a fact. I need police and an ambulance. My address is... She gave it. My husband has been abusing me for 2 months. He just tried to assault me. I defended myself. Please hurry. The operator asked questions. Where are you? Are you safe? Is anyone injured? She answered each one with precision. Facts, information, evidence. I have video documentation, she said, of multiple assaults. I have the timestamps. I have everything. We're sending units now, the operator said. Stay on the line. She did. The sirens arrived in 7 minutes. The first officer through the door found her sitting at the kitchen table, completely still, completely calm, like a woman waiting for her coffee to brew. He was still on the floor of the living room. He'd managed to sit up against the couch, but he wasn't moving otherwise. His breathing was shallow, his left eye was swelling, his lip was bleeding. Jade was still on the couch. She hadn't moved. She was staring at her hands like she'd never seen them before. Which one of you called? The officer asked. I did, Sarah said. She stood up. Her movements were measured. I defended myself. I have documentation of previous assaults. The officer looked at her. He was trained to read bodies, to see the markers of violence, and what he saw was a woman who was completely unharmed. Not a scratch, not a hair out of place, not even breathing hard. Then he looked at the husband. What happened? The officer asked. She attacked me, the husband said. His voice was thick. His words were slurring slightly. She went crazy. I have video, Sarah said. She walked to the bookshelf. She reached behind the books. She pulled out the hard drive. She handed it to the officer. 2 months of documentation. The first assault was 2 weeks ago. The second was 1 week ago. This one was today, at 6:47 p.m. The officer took the drive. He looked at his partner. His partner shrugged, the shrug of a man who has seen enough domestic violence cases to know the pattern when he sees it. We're going to need statements from all of you, the officer said. But first, Ma'am, are you injured? No, Sarah said. Do you feel safe? She looked at her husband. She looked at Jade. She looked at the officer. Yes, she said. I do now. The hard drive contained 47 hours of footage. The prosecutors watched it in the office. The defense attorney watched it. The judge watched selected clips. And what every single person who viewed that footage saw was a narrative so clear, so documented, so precise that there was no argument to be made. Day 1, him dismissing her, Jade being centered. Day 4, him raising his voice about her cooking. Day 7, him criticizing her choices. Day 10, the first slap, clear as daylight, his hand connecting with her face not flinching, her body absorbing the blow like it was nothing. Day 14, him telling Jade about leaving, about upgrading, about the apartment that would reflect who he actually is. Day 14 evening, him telling Sarah he didn't need her, that she was nothing without him. Day 15, the final moment, him raising his hand, her catching his wrist, the command in her voice, I would beat the living daylight out of you if you dare, and then him choosing violence anyway. The prosecutor looked at the judge looked at the evidence. Self-defense, the judge said. He was charged with assault, domestic battery, violation of consent. The charges accumulated like weight. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts, 18 months in county jail, a restraining order that said he couldn't come within 500 feet of the house, couldn't call, couldn't text, couldn't contact mutual friends, couldn't speak about her publicly. The job that the promotion had promised, gone. The company couldn't be associated with domestic violence litigation. His LinkedIn was deleted, his references were burned. His lawyer told him, you're not getting custody, you're not getting alimony, you're getting 18 months and then you're starting over with nothing. But the real ruin wasn't his. The videos went viral within hours, not because Sarah released them, because Jade's followers did. Someone with access to the police case files leaked the footage to Reddit. Reddit leaked it to Twitter. Twitter leaked it to TikTok. By morning, 10 million people had watched a video of Jade sitting on a couch, telling a woman to leave her husband, and then getting knocked unconscious by that wife. The comments started immediately. Karma. That's what you get for being a homewrecker. I hope she sued you. Delete your account. Delete your life. The followers dropped like stones. 10 million became 8 million. then 5 million, then 2 million. Her engagement rate crashed. The brands that had paid her to advertise their products sent cease and desist letters. We can no longer associate with your account. She tried to delete the videos of her with him. Too late. Screenshots existed. The internet never forgets. She tried to post an explanation. I didn't know he was married. That was a lie, and everyone knew it. The comments ratio became 100 to 1 negative. She turned off comments. She deactivated her account. She moved to a different city and changed her name on all her legal documents. The woman with 10 million followers became a person with 0 followers and a permanent record that said, "You broke a marriage. You celebrated it. You got caught." 18 months later, he was released on a Tuesday. The world had moved on. Nobody cared about him anymore. He was a statistic in the domestic violence database. A cautionary tale that nobody told anymore. He moved into a studio apartment. He got a job at a restaurant, washing dishes. The irony was so complete that it stopped being funny. A man who had demanded to be served, now serving everyone. He didn't try to contact her. The restraining order was clear. But that wasn't the reason. The reason was that he understood, finally, what she had known all along. That he had never actually owned her. That she had chosen to let him think he did. That the moment she decided otherwise, the game was over. His parents stopped calling. His friends moved on. His life became exactly what he'd told her she was worth, nothing. The house was hers now. The promotion he'd received meant nothing. The job he'd lost meant nothing. All of it meant nothing because he had taught her, through his own arrogance, how to destroy him completely. She sold the house 6 months after the trial ended. The money went into a savings account. She started a business, small, quiet, profitable. A business that didn't need a man to validate it. A business that was completely hers. She was 35 years old. She had a scar on her left shoulder blade that she stopped hiding. She had another scar, invisible, that had finally healed. She made tea in the morning. She sat by the window. She didn't think about him anymore. Sometimes, late at night, she thought about her father, the boxer, the man who had taught her that pain has an answer. That violence sometimes is the only language a certain kind of man understands. That a woman who knows how to break things is a woman who can't be broken. The city lights looked different now, softer. Like they were celebrating something. She called 911 instead of disappearing the evidence. She could have burned the hard drive. She could have erased the cameras. She could have claimed self-defense and let it end with the trial, but she didn't. She let the world see. She let the followers watch. She let the internet deliver the final blow. So drop your answer in the comments. Was Sarah a victim who found her strength? Or was she a predator who waited 2 months for the perfect kill? Because the real question isn't whether Mark and Jade deserved to lose. It's whether Sarah was justified in letting the abuse happen just to ensure their destruction was total.